My husband forced me to sign away my $1 million estate and luxury mansion. But he never expected an attorney to uncover everything. Keep reading, because what happened next completely changed my life. I'm Amara Delaney, 32, and I had always felt proud to carry on my grandmother's legacy. She left me a beautiful mansion, a sprawling estate that had been in our family for generations, and I cherished every inch of it. I never imagined that the person I trusted most would turn it all against me. Dorian Wexler, my husband, was charming, persuasive, and always knew exactly what to say to make me doubt myself. At first, he framed everything as for our future, insisting that signing some legal documents was just part of protecting our home and our wealth. I didn't fully understand the paperwork, but I trusted him. After all, we were married, and I believed he loved me. He started small, isolating me from my family. My younger brother, Jordan, who had always been my rock, began to notice Dorian's controlling behavior. But Dorian made me believe I was overreacting. "You're imagining things," he would say. "You're just paranoid." Even when I felt uneasy, his confidence made me doubt my own instincts. Finally, after weeks of gentle pressure and emotional manipulation, he handed me the papers and said, "If you really love me, you'll trust me and sign this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think he had our best interests at heart. So I signed, thinking I was protecting my marriage, my family, and my home. The truth hit me like a hurricane just days later. I found myself staring at copies of legal documents hidden in his office. My name wasn't on anything anymore. Every property, every asset that I had inherited, was now legally his. Shock, anger, and disbelief washed over me. How could the person I trusted most betray me in such a cold, calculated way? When I confronted Dorian, his response was cruel and humiliating. He screamed, calling me ungrateful, pathetic, and even questioned my intelligence. Every ounce of love I had believed in turned to betrayal. I was trapped in the very home that was supposed to be mine, feeling smaller and weaker than I had ever felt. I realized then that this wasn't just about money or property. It was about control, manipulation, and a man who thought he could erase me from my own life. But little did he know, the moment I found an ally, someone who truly understood the law and could fight back, my story was about to take a dramatic turn. This was only the beginning of a journey from betrayal to empowerment, and I had no idea how soon my life would change completely. Dorian Wexler had a way of making me question everything I knew about myself. At first, it was subtle. He suggested I shouldn't call my brother as often, that I needed more private time with him to strengthen our marriage. Jordan, my younger brother, had always been my protector, my sounding board, and suddenly I felt guilty for even thinking about speaking to him. Dorian made it seem like my family was interfering, that they didn't understand the pressures of a marriage like ours. Whenever I voiced a concern or hesitation, Dorian would brush it off with a smile and a gentle voice that made me doubt my own instincts. "You're overreacting, Amara," he'd say. "You're imagining problems that don't exist." Sometimes he accused me of being ungrateful, reminding me of all he did for me, all the sacrifices he made, as if I owed him unquestioning trust. Slowly, I began to wonder if maybe I was too sensitive, too anxious, too paranoid. The isolation was the hardest part. My calls with Jordan grew shorter because Dorian would stand nearby, casually reminding me, "Don't you think it's time to focus on us instead of worrying about them?" I felt torn. I loved my brother, but I didn't want Dorian to be upset. I wanted to be a good wife, and somehow, I thought that meant listening to him above all else. Then came the moment he put the final pressure on me. He handed me the legal papers and looked me straight in the eyes. "If you really love me," he said, "you'll trust me and sign this. I'm doing this for us, for our future." The words were like a weight on my chest. I wanted to believe him, to believe that love could be enough to protect what we had. I convinced myself that signing those papers was an act of loyalty, not submission. Even as I signed, a small voice inside me whispered doubt, but Dorian's calm authority drowned it out. He held my hand for a moment afterward, telling me how much he appreciated my trust. I wanted to feel proud, like I had done the right thing. Instead, a strange knot of unease formed in my stomach, one I couldn't ignore but didn't know how to confront. By the time the papers were signed, Dorian had achieved exactly what he wanted. I was legally trapped, emotionally vulnerable, and increasingly isolated from the people who loved me most. He had made me believe that following his instructions was the only way to show my love, that questioning him would mean I was failing as a wife. It was only later, when I began to look back at those moments, that I realized how carefully he had manipulated me. The isolation, the gaslighting, the gentle pressure, every piece had been calculated. At the time, I thought I was protecting my marriage. In reality, I was giving away my life, step by step, without even knowing it. After the papers were signed, Dorian's true colors began to show, and the cracks in our marriage grew wider every day. The mansion, once a home filled with family memories and warmth, started to feel like his personal playground. He walked through the halls with a sense of ownership that was suffocating. Every decision, every expense seemed to revolve around him and his desires. He began hosting lavish parties almost every weekend. Friends, business contacts, and strangers filled the rooms while I stood quietly to the side, unnoticed and unheard. Dorian never consulted me about the events or the money being spent. The bills climbed higher, and I realized that the estate I had inherited, the very home I had cherished, was being treated as if it belonged entirely to him. When I tried to voice my concerns, he brushed me off, saying I was too controlling or overthinking things. Late nights became the new normal. Dorian's phone would ring incessantly, and he would leave the room to take calls, returning hours later with vague excuses about work or friends. I tried to ignore the feeling that something was being hidden from me, but the unease settled deep in my chest. The lies became easier for him to tell and harder for me to confront. Each time I asked a question, his charm and quick answers made me doubt my own suspicions. The distance between us grew, and I felt powerless. I watched him laugh with guests I didn't know, see him pour champagne for people who didn't care about me, and listen to him make promises I wasn't a part of. Every glance he gave me felt like a reminder that I had signed away my power, and I started to feel smaller in my own home. Worse, I began to suspect there was another woman. Small things added up: a lingering glance at a woman during a party, hushed phone conversations, and the way he'd suddenly step out for a minute that would stretch into hours. My heart sank with a mix of fear, anger, and helplessness. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but a part of me stayed silent. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, and part of me still clung to the hope that he loved me, that this was just a phase or a misunderstanding. I spent nights lying awake in the master bedroom, staring at the ceiling, feeling trapped in a home that was no longer mine, with a husband who acted more like a stranger than a partner. The emotional weight was crushing. Every party, every reckless expense, every secret call chipped away at the life I thought we were building together. And yet, despite all the signs, I held my tongue. I stayed silent, trying to convince myself that love would solve everything, that patience might bring him back to me. But inside, I was torn apart. The mansion felt cold, the laughter hollow, and I began to realize that Dorian wasn't just ignoring me. He was erasing me, one selfish act at a time. One evening, as I walked past Dorian's office to get a glass of water, a stack of papers caught my eye. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I stepped closer, trying to glance at the top sheet without drawing attention. My hands trembled as I carefully pulled the documents out. My stomach dropped the moment I saw the words printed clearly. Every property, every asset, every part of the estate that had been my grandmother's. Legally, it all belonged to Dorian. I sank into the nearest chair, unable to breathe properly. Shock and disbelief washed over me. My heart pounded in my ears as I reread the papers, thinking perhaps I was misunderstanding something. But there was no mistake. I didn't own a thing. Every signature, every line, every detail confirmed that the home I had grown up in, the mansion I had inherited, the estate I had dreamed of protecting, it wasn't mine anymore. For a long moment, I simply sat there, frozen, my mind racing. How could he do this? How could the person I trusted, the person I loved, betray me so completely? The thought of Dorian smiling, thinking he had outsmarted me, made my chest tighten. I wanted to scream, to run, to confront him, but fear and disbelief held me back. Finally, I gathered the courage to confront him. I found him in the living room, leaning casually against the bar, as if nothing was wrong. My voice shook as I asked, "Dorian, what is this? Why isn't anything in my name?" I held the papers up, my hands trembling. He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I might see a flicker of guilt. But it didn't come. Instead, his face twisted in anger, and he shouted words I'll never forget. "You're pathetic. Ungrateful. I've done everything for you, and this is how you repay me." His voice echoed through the house, sharp and cutting, each word slicing through the last remnants of my confidence. The emotional abuse escalated quickly. He mocked me in front of others, twisted my concerns into accusations, and made me feel small, incapable, and foolish. Every question I asked was met with anger, every attempt to assert myself dismissed. The home that had once been a sanctuary felt suffocating, the walls closing in as I realized the full scope of his betrayal. That night, I lay awake in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely alone in the world. I had trusted him with everything, my heart, my home, my future, and he had taken it all from me. Tears came freely, but beneath them was a fire I hadn't yet recognized. This betrayal was cruel, calculated, and deliberate, but somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that this wasn't the end. I didn't know it yet, but discovering his treachery would be the catalyst for the fight of my life. The same man who thought he had destroyed me had unknowingly set the stage for my return. Stronger, wiser, and determined to reclaim everything he had tried to steal. The breaking point came on a night I will never forget. Dorian hosted one of his lavish parties, the kind he loved, filled with music, laughter, and people who didn't know the truth about him or me. I tried to stay composed, pretending to enjoy the evening, but every smile I forced felt heavy, every laugh hollow. I felt like a stranger in my own home, a guest in a mansion that was no longer mine. Then I saw her, Sierra Langston, Dorian's mistress. She glided through the crowd like she owned the place, her expensive dress sparkling under the chandeliers. And Dorian? He was by her side, beaming with pride, as if flaunting her in front of me was some kind of cruel game. My chest tightened, my hands trembled, but I stayed rooted in place, trying to convince myself to walk away, to ignore it. I should have turned and left, but something froze me. I overheard him whisper to her in the quiet corner of the room, words that shattered me completely. She's stupid enough to sign it all away. Soon she'll have nothing. My heart stopped. My stomach churned. I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. This was no longer just betrayal. It was humiliation, calculated and deliberate. He had planned it all, manipulated me, and now he was laughing about it with the woman he was cheating on me with. I wanted to scream, to confront him, to tell everyone in that room the truth. But I couldn't. The anger mixed with fear, the shock mixed with shame. Tears burned my eyes as I realized just how powerless I had become in my own home. The mansion, the estate, the life I had worked so hard to protect. All of it was slipping through my fingers, and Dorian didn't even bother hiding his cruelty. I retreated to a quiet corner of the mansion, my back pressed against the cool wall. The laughter, the music, the chatter of guests, it all felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. I could barely breathe, barely think. The home that had once been my sanctuary felt alien, hostile. Every room reminded me of memories I could no longer claim as my own. Every decoration a symbol of the life Dorian had stolen. I sank to the floor, my body shaking, and let myself finally break. The tears came freely now, hot and relentless, carrying the weight of betrayal, heartbreak, and fear. I felt the full force of what Dorian had done, not just legally taking the estate, but emotionally crushing me, isolating me, and flaunting his victory in the cruelest possible way. That night, as I sat on the marble floor of the home I no longer felt connected to, something inside me shifted. The pain was unbearable, the humiliation sharp, but beneath it all, a spark of resolve began to burn. I realized that I could not stay broken forever. This was my breaking point, yes, but it would also be the moment that fueled the fight to reclaim everything he had tried to take from me. I wiped my tears, stood up slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I began to plan. Not for revenge yet, not fully, but for the moment I would no longer be powerless in my own home. I didn't know where to turn. My brother Jordan was furious when he found out, but he couldn't fix this alone. I felt trapped, helpless, and desperate. Finally, after days of sleepless nights and endless worrying, I decided to seek help from someone I trusted, Darius Holt, the family attorney who had once worked closely with my grandmother. I had grown up hearing stories of his wisdom, his sharp mind, and his unwavering sense of justice. Maybe, just maybe, he could help me now. I scheduled a meeting and arrived at his office, clutching the stack of papers that had ruined my life. My hands trembled, and my voice shook as I explained everything. How Dorian had pressured me to sign the documents, isolated me from my family, and now claimed full ownership of my estate and mansion. Darius listened carefully, his face serious, his eyes scanning the papers I handed him. As he went through the documents, I watched him closely, searching for any sign of hope. After a few tense moments, he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Amara, there are red flags everywhere. These signatures, they don't match. Some of these clauses are highly irregular. Whoever prepared these papers knew exactly what they were doing. I felt a flicker of hope ignite inside me, mixed with relief and fear. Relief that someone competent could see what I couldn't, fear of what would happen next, and hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely powerless. I told him about my suspicions of Dorian's intentions, the lies, and the manipulation. He nodded thoughtfully, as if confirming what he already suspected. Finally, Darius leaned back in his chair and looked me squarely in the eyes. Amara, he trapped you, but the law might still set you free. We need to act carefully, gather evidence, and be prepared for a battle. But this isn't the end. You still have a chance to reclaim what is rightfully yours. His words were like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. For the first time since discovering Dorian's betrayal, I felt the tiniest bit of control returning. We discussed strategies, ways to uncover forged documents, and how to trace the flow of money from the estate. Darius explained the legal processes, what to expect in court, and the importance of patience and precision. Every word he said gave me strength, a renewed sense of determination I hadn't felt in weeks. That day, leaving his office, I felt a spark of courage that had been buried under fear and despair. For the first time, I realized that Dorian's manipulation didn't have to define me. With Darius on my side, I had an ally, someone who could help me untangle the web of lies and deceit. The fight to reclaim my home, my inheritance, and my dignity was just beginning, but now I knew I wasn't facing it alone. Hope returned, fragile but real, and with it, a quiet resolve. I would not let him win. Not this time. After the breaking point, I knew I couldn't face this alone. Darius Holt became my anchor, the person who could guide me through the storm. We spent hours going over every document, every clause, every signature. I watched as his eyes narrowed, his fingers tracing the lines of ink on the papers. There was a seriousness in his expression that made my chest tighten. Something significant had caught his attention, and I could sense it before he even spoke. Amara, he said finally, setting the papers down carefully. These documents aren't just unusual. Some of the signatures are forged. My stomach dropped. Forged? My heart pounded as I tried to process the words. Every memory of trust, every moment I had believed Dorian, felt heavier now. He hadn't just manipulated me. He had planned this betrayal, every step carefully calculated. Darius continued, his voice steady but sharp. Look here, Sierra Langston's name appears as a witness on these documents. That signature? It's fake. She never witnessed anything, but she's listed as if she did. This wasn't just a simple mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, premeditated con. The reality hit me like a hammer. Dorian hadn't merely tricked me. He had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal everything I had inherited. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and a strange surge of determination. For the first time, the betrayal didn't feel like the end. It felt like a beginning. Darius's discovery meant there was a way to fight back, to expose the truth, and to reclaim what was mine. My mind raced with questions, with plans forming faster than I could speak them aloud. How long had he been planning this? How many lies had I swallowed without realizing? And most importantly, how would I make him pay for every cruel word, every calculated move? Darius laid out a plan. We'll need to gather evidence, interview witnesses, and document everything carefully. We have to be precise. One misstep could let him slip away. But the law is on your side, Amara, and once we present the forged documents in court, there's no hiding the truth. I nodded, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Every detail mattered now. Every forged signature, every hidden clause, every reckless lie would be part of the case that would finally bring justice. As we worked together, my fear began to transform into focus. I started to see Dorian not as an untouchable figure, but as someone vulnerable, someone who had underestimated me. He thought he had destroyed me completely, but he hadn't accounted for the law, for evidence, for an attorney who understood the system, or for my own determination. The more we uncovered, the more confident I became. Each discovery of forgery, each irregularity in the papers, strengthened my resolve. I realized that this wasn't just about winning back a mansion or an estate. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my voice. By the time we were ready to take the case to court, I felt a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. Dorian had built his plan thinking I was weak, that I would remain silent. But together, Darius and I had turned the tables. The legal trap he had set for me was now unraveling, and I was ready to strike back. The night of the confrontation arrived, and Dorian was in his element. He hosted another extravagant party, filling the mansion with glittering lights, flowing champagne, and guests who hung on his every word. He walked through the rooms like a king, laughing loudly, telling anyone who would listen about his success, and how the mansion was entirely his now. My stomach twisted as I watched him, but this time, I didn't feel the familiar fear or despair. I had a plan, and I had an ally. I entered the party calmly, dressed simply yet elegantly, every step measured. Guests barely noticed me at first, distracted by the spectacle Dorian had created. He spotted me and gave that confident, mocking smile, the one that had haunted my nights for months. But I didn't flinch. I kept my composure, my head high, letting him think I was still powerless. Inside, however, I was brimming with quiet determination. Dorian approached, placing a hand lightly on my arm. "Amara," he said with a smirk, "you're looking subdued tonight. Don't you want to enjoy yourself?" I smiled politely, not responding to his provocation. I could feel his irritation beginning to rise, though he hid it behind practiced charm. Then the moment arrived. Darius Holt appeared, stepping through the crowd with purposeful strides, holding the legal summons in his hand. The room seemed to pause for a fraction of a second as he approached. Dorian's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his face that he quickly tried to cover. "Dorian Vexler," Darius announced clearly, his voice calm but commanding, "you are served. These documents pertain to the lawsuit filed by Amara Delaney regarding the fraudulent transfer of her estate and mansion." The room went silent. Guests exchanged glances, sensing the tension that crackled in the air. Dorian's eyes widened, his confident demeanor cracking ever so slightly. He took a step back, trying to regain control, but the mask he had worn for months was slipping. His hand, which had rested casually on my shoulder, fell to his side. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice rising, anger lacing every word. "This is ridiculous. You can't. This is—" He stopped, words failing him as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. The calm, calculated persona he had projected was gone, replaced by panic and disbelief. I stood there, composed and collected, watching him unravel. The power he thought he had over me had vanished. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of my own strength. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to beg. His fraud was exposed, and everyone in the room could see it. Darius handed the papers to the court clerk, who confirmed service, and Dorian's guests murmured in shock. His mistress, Sierra, looked uneasy, her own smile faltering. Dorian realized that his lies, his manipulation, and his schemes were collapsing in front of everyone he had tried to impress. For the first time, I felt a sense of relief, a sense of justice in motion. The confrontation was only the beginning, but watching Dorian's mask crack, watching him realize he could no longer control the story, I knew the tide had turned. And this time, it was finally in my favor. The courtroom was tense, every eye fixed on Dorian and me as the trial began. The room smelled of polished wood and faint perfume, the air thick with anticipation. Dorian entered first, his posture confident, his suit perfectly pressed, his smile practiced. He had spent months convincing everyone around him that he was the victim and that I was overreacting, unstable, and unreasonable. I could feel his gaze on me, filled with arrogance, but I held my head high, refusing to let him see even a flicker of fear. From the start, Dorian tried to turn the court against me. He spoke smoothly, painting me as emotional, impulsive, and incapable of managing the estate. "Your Honor," he said, voice calm but sly, "my wife has always been reckless with finances. She let her emotions control her decisions. This lawsuit is nothing more than a reaction to personal grievances." I felt a pang of frustration, knowing he was twisting the truth, but I reminded myself to stay calm. The real battle wasn't in words, it was in evidence. Darius Holt rose next, his presence commanding. He laid out the documents we had painstakingly collected over weeks. Each piece of evidence was precise, clear, and undeniable. He showed the forged signatures, highlighting the irregularities in Sierra's name as a supposed witness. He presented bank transfers, tracing how funds from the estate had been secretly moved under Dorian's control. The room grew silent, the judge leaning forward with interest, and I could feel the shift in energy. Then came the moment that would seal their fate. Under Darius's careful questioning, Sierra Langston took the stand. She tried to maintain her composure, to stick to the story Dorian had relied on her to repeat. But when asked directly about her signature on the legal documents, her voice faltered. I don't remember signing this," she stammered. Darius pressed further, and she began contradicting herself, her lies unraveling in real time. The court murmured as the truth became impossible to hide. I watched Dorian closely. His face drained of color, his confident demeanor collapsing piece by piece. Each slip Sierra made, each document Darius presented, chipped away at the illusion he had built so carefully. The man who had humiliated me, manipulated me, and stolen my estate was now powerless, exposed for everyone to see. By the time Darius finished, the evidence was overwhelming. Dorian tried to argue, to regain control, but it was useless. His lies, manipulation, and schemes were laid bare before the court, and the judge's expression showed that the truth was clear. I felt a mix of relief, satisfaction, and vindication, knowing that the man who had tormented me for months could no longer hide behind his charm or intimidation. As the session ended, Dorian slumped in his chair, defeated and humiliated. Sierra avoided my gaze, realizing the extent of her complicity. And I sat quietly, my heart steady, watching the man who had tried to ruin me unravel publicly, knowing that justice was finally on my side. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of betrayal lifting, replaced by a deep, unwavering sense of strength. The day the verdict was announced, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation unlike anything I had experienced before. The courtroom was packed, everyone waiting for the judge's final decision. Dorian sat across from me, his face pale and tight, the confidence he had carried for months finally slipping away. Sierra hovered nearby, anxious and fidgety, no longer the smug, untouchable woman she had been at the parties. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak. Every word hit like a hammer, ringing with authority and finality. After reviewing the evidence, including forged signatures, fraudulent documents, and unlawful transfers, this court rules in favor of Amara Delaney. Full ownership of the estate, and the mansion is restored to her immediately. Relief and disbelief washed over me. The house that had felt like a prison, the estate that had been ripped from my control, were mine again, legally and undeniably. Dorian's reaction was a mixture of anger, fear, and shock. The judge continued, detailing the damages he was ordered to pay for his deceit and manipulation. Criminal charges were now pending, and he would be held accountable for every act of fraud he had committed. The room buzzed with murmurs as his empire of lies crumbled before the eyes of everyone who had once admired him. Sierra's face fell when it became clear that Dorian could no longer protect her or the life she had hoped to enjoy by his side. Without hesitation, she abandoned him, slipping out of the courtroom quietly, leaving him broke, disgraced, and entirely alone. Dorian, who had once flaunted wealth and control, sat slumped in the chair, stripped of everything he thought he had earned through manipulation and deceit. I felt a rush of vindication and empowerment as the weight of months of fear, anxiety, and betrayal lifted from my shoulders. The mansion, with its grand halls and familiar rooms, now felt like home again, filled with the peace and control I had always deserved. Walking through each room, I imagined the countless ways I could reclaim not just the property, but the life and confidence that Dorian had tried so hard to steal. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my sense of self. Every smile from friends and family, every congratulatory handshake, reinforced the truth I had fought so hard to prove. I was not a victim. I had been pushed to the brink, manipulated and betrayed, but I had survived, and now justice had finally been served. As I stood on the balcony of my restored mansion, the evening sun casting warm light across the estate, I felt a deep, satisfying calm. The pain of the past months was still there, but it no longer held power over me. I had faced betrayal, deception, and cruelty, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and in control of my own life. He thought he stole everything from me. Instead, I watched him lose it all. Do you think Amara made the right choice by trusting the law and fighting back, or should she have tried to reason with Dorian instead? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story of betrayal, courage, and justice.